That's some very frisky worms right there.
The first couple years of learning how to manage the worm bin was a struggle. I had too much moisture, sometimes adding too much food, and picking out every worm from finished compost was a painstaking, time-consuming chore. It got very tedious. It's been a couple of years since I've done this. I got really busy for a while. Um, but now that I am doing this again, I'm remembering how much fun it was. I just really enjoy just watching the worms just do their thing. And it gives me a lot of insight as to how their world happens. There was this one time I brought home a bunch of junk from work, including a couple shadow boxes. And while I'd likely never use a shadow box for its intended use, I came up with a much more interesting idea. I wanted to observe how worm composting really works and whether I could improve what I was doing with the worm bin by conducting a few experiments. So I filled it the same way I would fill the worm bin at the time. Food first, then potting soil on top to prevent mold, which also allows the worms access to the food from all sides for more effective composting. Besides the composting experimentation, I knew watching the worms would be just the sort of fun I'd really like, and sure enough, I often spent hours just sitting and watching them move about and interact with each other. Not only did I begin to see how the worms moved about, I also started noticing specific behaviors, like the way they feel out the space they're in, and the way they will sit in place for a while as they graze, reversing a bit to then reach other spots in the same place, like reaching for multiple dishes at all-you-can-eat sushi. When moving to another place, they feel around to explore as they go, and will go into reverse completely to change directions. Watching them eat was fascinating, something like watching snails eat. Just like in the worm bin, they would go for the sugary and rotten foods first. They also ate the molds and fungi growing from rotting food. Food that was too fresh, they would avoid until it started going rotten. The more full of bacteria, the more they liked it. I was really curious about how the worms interact when they initiate their reproductive activities, and while at that time I didn't get to see how it occurred, I often found worm orgies happening early in the morning. Why so many around the same place and same time in the morning, I have no idea. Occasionally, there would be a couple worms doing their thing at some other time of day, but not very often. Just like the way I was doing things with my worm bin at the time, it was difficult to remove the sticky wet compost. After removing the sticky wet compost, I would go through it and pick out the worms. When I did this with the bin, I would put the fresh compost into another bin or bucket to then sit for 2 or 3 months, then sort through it again to pick out the juvenile worms that had grown big enough to more easily handle, as well as any strays I had missed the first time. To see how I might change how I put ingredients into the worm bin, I wanted to see what would happen if I used various materials as a layer on the bottom. Maybe it would make the compost come out easier when it was finished. Super gross. The worms get to enjoy that now. As a result, the worms tunneled through the peat moss a lot. The paper all but disappeared, and they didn't go through the heavy sand as much. Since the vermicompost was quite wet, the peat moss and paper-based compost were very sticky to remove, yet the sand compost came away much easier. It's been a while since I've done this, so I'm simply going to pick up where I've left off. So this is the plan that I'm going to do. The one on the far side is going to be a soil sandwich. So basically a layer of soil, food layer, and another soil layer on top. The next one, I want to try a layering thing. So food on the bottom, layer of soil, and then in about 2 or 3 weeks, another layer of food and soil. Not that full, but that's the idea. I definitely had a little bit of a brain fart putting this together because I made the middle compartment the same soil sandwich as the one side instead of just food on the bottom. So I'm just gonna roll with it. It's just going to be what it is. Maybe I'll do that another time, who knows. And then the last one is going to be food with just a soil layer on top. So the end result is going to be the same product. But what I'm curious about is the uniformity of breakdown. How well it will decompose, how much moisture there will be. That's what I'm interested in seeing over the course of this experiment. I have placed the food ingredients facing the sides for easy observation on both sides. The next step here is to get a good handful of worms for the shadowbox, which I will then divide somewhat evenly between each of the slots. It's been a few weeks since I've given these worms food. They have had a lot of food in here, so I'm sure they're doing just fine. However, I did let them go a little hungry on purpose so that I could potentially see more activity when I put them into the viewer. I always wear gloves when I go through the worm bin. Not only does it keep my nails clean, it also makes it easier to separate any baby worms. So baby worms are very tiny and they often get stuck to my hands. And while they still get stuck to the gloves, it's not as bad and it's easier to get them off.
It's like opening a present. Look at that. That's what I want to watch in the worm viewer experiment. I've got 126 grams of worms. So for the remaining worms, I'm just gonna give them some more food here and cover them back up, and then I'll get to what I'm doing. Yummy! Avocados, apples, and potatoes tend to be their favorite foods. But yeah, they really love banana peels and anything that's a little bit rotten or well cooked. They really like leftover tea leaves for this reason. So 125 grams of worms. It's going to be a little less than that because there's some compost in there too. But what I'm going to do is take about 50 grams for the wider ones and then 25 for the middle one. So I've actually measured out about 35 grams for the middle one, just because it seems to be somewhat compost as well. Not the most uniform experiment, but it should do the trick. I'm going to put this into its sleeve. Get it all covered up nice and dark the way they like it. And then I will come back in a few hours or in a day or so and check on them and see what's happening. All right, let's see what we've got here. The worms have completely infiltrated the layers. It's actually really cool. Now begins the next 6 weeks of observation and lots of entertainment, for me at least.